Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Keppel. I'm a member of the Westminster Social Justice team. The Social Justice Forums are built around a common theme, and this program year, the theme is Building Solidarity Together, walking alongside all God's people, striving for a more just world, acting courageously to transform social systems and relationships. This morning's forum concludes a series on current immigration concerns. We're pleased to welcome to Westminster Michele Garnett McKenzie, who is the Interim Co-Executive Director at the Advocates for Human Rights based here in Minneapolis. Michele joined the Advocates in 1999 as an attorney representing asylum seekers and detained immigrants, and later managed the organization's Immigration Legal Services Program. Michele has documented and reported on human rights issues and is the author of publications on human trafficking and immigrants' rights. Her presentation is titled Understanding Immigration in Perilous Times. The first months of 2025 have seen unprecedented targeting of immigrants and the organizations and people who protect them. From abductions and expulsions to the termination of long-standing protection programs, the power of the U.S. immigration enforcement is testing America's tolerance towards intolerance. Michele will explore what's happening and how a human rights framework can strengthen our collective response in these perilous times. Now, first, a few logistical questions or issues. Remember that we want to have respectful conversations and are committed to that throughout this process, which means also respectful listening with an open heart. And we have developed kind of a series of questions or comments or ideas to facilitate our conversations here on Sunday mornings. And just take a look at those, if you would please. And this week, we're focusing on generous listening. So listening from the standpoint of compassion and hopes that we'll learn more as we listen. So let's see. And before we get started, let's have a short prayer. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices from our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so that we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. So now please welcome Michele.
Thank you. We have one of the most exciting things of joining you is that I learn new PowerPoint skills each time. So there's a B key that will black out the screen. It's magic. So check it out. This is part of the joy of working in community is you never know what little things you will find. Thank you so much for having us back here at Westminster. I've had the privilege of coming to the Social Justice Forum a few times, and I always say yes and don't share necessarily with my colleagues because it really empowers and feeds my soul, and I am so grateful for this community. Karen Evans is here. She's on our board, formerly our board chair. I was going to say our board chair. And this is how we're embedded in our community. Kay, we see you all the time. This is what gives us resilience and hope. And so thank you for being here and letting the community come in to help inform and learn together as we kind of navigate always tricky times and tricky questions. As you said, I'm currently the one of our co-executive directors in an interim role. After 22 years, our executive director has stepped back and is a senior advisor. She did, planned this in advance, but managed to have her retirement be just 5 days before the new administration took place. And so, I'm glad for her and Like, really? Really, 22 years? You couldn't have made it 23? But it is really a privilege to be stepping into this role temporarily as we navigate something that both we haven't seen and we were built for. So the Advocates for Human Rights really works in partnerships in our home community here. We're just down the street in Minneapolis, and with partners around the globe. Our mission is to promote civil society and reinforce the rule of law. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. I think in this moment, we are finding out more and more how important those two factors are. But here in the upper Midwest, most of our work really focuses on providing free immigration legal help to people who are seeking asylum from persecution, who are seeking protection from deportation to torture, people who are detained by immigration and customs enforcement or ICE, victims of human trafficking, and children who are facing deportation proceedings on their own. And we do this work because there's no public defender system in the immigration system. It's a civil administrative proceeding that has the power to detain and expel people with really broad authority and does not provide any of the protections that we've built into our criminal legal system, which sometimes are inadequate, but exist. The protections we have in immigration are not really equivalent. So the Advocates was started back at a moment much like this. In 1983, a group of lawyers came together and said, how can we be engaged in using our time and our skills to promote and protect human rights? What can we do? And we have been part of really fostering volunteers' engagement in human rights work since that time. So our reason for being is to make sure that not only are human rights protected and respected and fulfilled, but that we all can play a part in doing that. It's not just a few people sitting in an office, it's all of us. No matter what we choose to do, what big or small commitments to it, we all have that power to be advocates for human rights. As I said, we were founded to promote civil society and reinforce the rule of law. I've read that mission for 25 years, and for a lot of it, I'm like, what is civil society? And what does all of this mean? I could understand on paper the words, but in this moment, I'm really seeing how this mission could not be more urgent. At our core, we have a simple, powerful belief that every human being is equal in dignity and rights. That's what human rights are there to guarantee. They're not just lists of things, activities, standards. They're the building blocks for human dignity. And that means the right to due process and a fair day in court. It means the right to be free from torture or arbitrary arrest or detention or exile without a hearing. It means the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution. Those are basic human rights. We stand up for the rule of law because when no one is above the law and everyone is protected by the law, communities are safer, individuals are safer, we're stronger, we're freer. That's what the rule of law is, that we're all subject to it and nobody is above it. And that's a powerful, incredibly important concept. And we're here to ensure that civil society, and that's us, that's churches, it's congregations, it's nonprofit organizations, it's anybody who's not the government or business, that's civil society, is not just present, but powerful, that we are active actors in creating and maintaining our society alongside government. They're not fully responsible for how things work. We are, and we show up in civil society. Now, our work as I mentioned, spans the globe. We partner with human rights defenders to end gender-based violence and to abolish the death penalty worldwide. And here at home, often we are seeing some of those same human rights defenders in our asylum practice. Right? Those are people who, because of their work, because of their stand for human rights, have to flee their countries because they would face human rights violations for that work. So when we are feeling like there's a crisis here, we mean it. Like, we have seen this kind of authoritarian behavior affect our colleagues around the world. Now, you've seen the headlines around immigration. Due process is being bypassed to abduct and expel students and green card holders and people who are seeking asylum. People are being sent to notoriously dangerous prisons outside the United States. And, the rhetoric isn't just about a person who doesn't have the lawful right to be here, but also around how can we send U.S. citizens there? What are our options to help kind of promote a silencing of viewpoints that are in dissent? So I want to be clear that while the attacks on immigration right now are serious, they're not, I think, the purpose or the end game. They're not the only thing that will happen. These attacks on immigrants and the organizations and the people who protect them are really out of an authoritarian playbook. They are targeting dissent and due process, and fear is being weaponized to try to silence us. We have lost, contracts are being sort of slashed to try to weaken civil society. Lawyers and law firms are being explicitly targeted for their work protecting asylum seekers. That was, I think, one of the most startling executive orders that came out, was investigating the law firms and organizations who provide free legal services to people seeking asylum. We've never had that just by name. That big law and pro bono is bad for asylum seekers. So this isn't an attack on one group of people or one sector alone. It's really a targeted abuse of power to punish and attack people who stand in the way of an agenda or a tone or a stance. When it comes to immigration policy, I think, it's been like a scattershot approach, sort of like a shotgun a pellet across the broadside of a building, where we don't know where to look or where to hide or how to prepare. But the first week of executive orders gave us a blueprint. One particular tactic was militarizing us against an invasion. We didn't quite know how that would look in this militarized space. The U.S.-Mexico border area is highly militarized already, but using the word invasion, which 20 years ago was sort of a fringe theory of immigration, anti-immigrant activists from the White House, has been really startling and also really powerful. We've seen the invocation of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. That is certainly one of the problems, or one of the areas that I think we didn't really expect. We've also seen something we just heard arguments on at the Supreme Court this week, the attack on birthright citizenship, with an attempt to redefine the constitutional definition of who is a U.S. citizen through an executive order. That question was not precisely before the court on Thursday. They were actually considering something that would have much broader implications for other things, which is whether a single court in one part of the country can issue a nationwide injunction or stop a policy going forward or not. And in this case, if the court does not allow a nationwide injunction, we will have people in about, I think, 28 states who, if they're not born to documented individuals, will not be considered U.S. citizens. But if they're born in a different state, they would be. This is, going to be really hard to sort out for years to come, if that is allowed to happen. And the law on birthright citizenship has been clear for more than 125 years. So this is a pretty radical departure from both the words on the page and court decisions upholding that. We've seen a pause on refugee resettlement. I don't know if there were any groups here, any of you folks who are part of the Welcome Corps. Has anybody done this? This was a new initiative by the Biden administration to allow individuals to sponsor refugees. For the first time, we had never had that opportunity, and we were building this new Welcome Corps, this new ability for people to band together and individually support refugees coming into the U.S. to really make us more nimble. We've been kind of going through solely big national church, primarily church organizations, to resettle about 100,000 refugees every year for decades, and this would have given us a new tool to make sure people could be protected. That's gone, and refugee resettlement is still not moving forward. So that means people who were partway through a very extensive vetting process to come join family are not making it here, with the notable exception of some Afrikaners who were granted refugee status because their pro-apartheid status is opposed by their governments, which I think is a really telling indicator of the real narrative behind the anti-immigration rhetoric. We've expanded an authority called expedited removal, which allows the government to apprehend and expel people who have been in the United States less than 2 years now without any hearing. So this is really sweeping authority. It previously had been authorized for people who were found within 150 miles of the border within 14 days of their arrival. And now it's anywhere in the U.S. within 2 years of their arrival. So people who were paroled into the U.S. in order to make a claim for asylum and have a scheduled hearing date are having their hearings dates pulled, and the government saying, we're just going to pull you out of that. The ridiculousness of this is that they have a right in that expedited process to claim asylum, and if they claim asylum, they'll be put back in court, which they'd already done. So it's this redundant, ridiculous bureaucracy that is really designed to both scare people and tell them they have to leave, but also to tie up valuable, very scarce court time. We've blocked asylum at the border and taken away some of the lawful pathways for people to seek that. We've terminated several temporary protected statuses. The White House is going after more aggressively what they deem to be sanctuary jurisdictions. Minneapolis is a sanctuary jurisdiction. It has been for quite some time. That sounds like if you're here, you can't be arrested, right? If you think back to when St. Paul was a sanctuary for the mafia back, for the Chicago mob back in the 1930s, right? That was a sanctuary jurisdiction where they had cut a deal. The St. Paul police had cut a deal with the mob and said, as long as you don't do anything bad in our city, we won't let anybody come in and arrest you. Okay, that was a sanctuary jurisdiction. Didn't really play out well, but it's fascinating history. Eventually, they didn't play by all the rules. But what we have in place is not a sanctuary, in fact. It is a very limited authority or directive by the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul that originated with law enforcement that says we are not going to ask about immigration status if it's not necessary for the particular thing you're doing with the city. But if the federal government wants us to cooperate on a joint, law enforcement initiative, they can and will. If they've got a criminal arrest warrant for somebody, the city will cooperate. The Hennepin County has never had any separation policies, so they've always turned people over to ICE or called ICE when they're processing somebody out of detention. These things, this is not a sanctuary. It's a limited common sense thing that's really designed to get witnesses to crime and victims of crime to come forward and report that to the police without fear of being turned over for deportation. But that is being weaponized, and we've had Minnesota jurisdictions approached now by ICE to make sure that they're entering into agreements and otherwise with the threat of withholding federal funds if they don't. We have troublingly seen the imposition of new registration requirements that attempt to make people feel or be subject to criminal proceedings if they aren't registered with the government. Most people are registered, but it's a confusing array of requirements that you have to go in and be fingerprinted, and if your kid turns 14, that you have to take them in, and it's again a scary thing. And we've seen detention capacity just skyrocket. I think the budget request from the White House to Congress is over the next several years to increase the number of available beds for detention to an average daily population of 100,000. And they are looking for a 365% budget increase. I would like a 365% budget increase too, but that's not how the world works. We don't have infinite capacity, and we need to make decisions and investments in a sensible way. We don't. We put it into one bucket and then complain that the other bucket can't keep up, right? We're putting all of that infrastructure into our immigration enforcement and starving our courts of any ability to hear those cases, and then saying, oh my goodness, there are too many people. That is a long-standing tactic. That is not something that's new to this administration. That is the way we have invested and created our immigration system over countless administrations. So it's just here for the taking at this moment. One of the areas that we've really seen, I think, the most shock and awe at the moment has been the targeting of people who were here as students or are here as students for what they have said and for their protest activity. And I think we've probably all seen videos of the woman from Tufts sort of abducted off the street by armed, masked, unidentified people in a blacked out SUV with no badges, no acknowledgement of which agency they are from. That is an abduction. That is not an arrest. Arrests take place with an identified law enforcement agency with accountability and transparency. You are being transported to this place. This is what we're doing. These are the charges against you. When we just grab people off the street with a bunch of masked assailants, how would you trust that's even the government? How would you know that? You can buy a little tactical vest on the internet and go out and look like ICE. We've seen that in a really startling way on video, but we've also seen it here with one of our clients. Our client, we represent Mr. Hawk. He's a student at Mankato State University. He lawfully entered the U.S. in 2021 on an F1 student visa. He's 20 years old now. He's very young. And on March 28th, DHS followed him home from campus after a class and arrested him outside his house. His parents were in town visiting because two of his siblings also go to Mankato State and they're graduating this year. So the parents had come over for that. And the reason they gave was purportedly based on a visa revocation, that his student visa had been revoked. He hadn't been told about this. It hadn't been his status database at the university hadn't been changed. But after he was taken for processing, then his record was terminated in the SEVIS system, this federal database that's tracking students. And it included an explanation that the student is terminated pursuant to a couple of provisions of the law. One of those allows deportation for failure to maintain status. But he was so they terminated his status for failure to maintain his status. That was a little perplexing. And the other was deportation on certain foreign policy grounds, but those were not specified. Now, the executive orders and public statements from federal officials indicate that the government views commentary on Palestinian human rights as a foreign policy threat and a reason to initiate deportation proceedings against international students. And the initial charging document that we got in his case from March 28th just said he failed to maintain his status. Then on April 1st, he received another undated, unmarked letter, purportedly from the Department of State, informing him that additional information became available after his visa was issued and his F1 status was revoked. We don't know why that happened or what. The government in the case submitted some evidence of some interactions between local ICE and the Department of State regarding him and seeking the department's termination of his visa. The ICE then conveyed that he had been charged with, which is true, assault in the 5th degree. He had a pushing match with a family friend over the family friend had insulted his mother, and there was some shoving. He wasn't arrested. The police were called. He then pled guilty on a misdemeanor crime and did some. I think that was closed. The case was closed after he completed his community service several years ago. So that hadn't triggered any problem at that time, but it did here potentially. There was another memo in the case on April 5th. The judge, the immigration judge, or on April 9th, the immigration judge held a bond hearing because this guy's now been in jail for 10, 15 days. And he has a right to a bond hearing. She found that there was no danger to the community. She looked at this criminal charge, concluded his detention wasn't justified, set a $7,500 bond, which has become kind of a low bond in the immigration world, said he had virtually no flight risk situation, but to address that, she put that bond on him, and he paid that bond. The government didn't come up with any evidence at that point that he had a flight danger, a flight risk. They gave nothing to justify the arrest and detention, the continued detention. They didn't do anything, but the next day they appealed the judge's decision, and that automatically stayed his release. So then he was sitting down in Freeborn County Jail, just sitting. This is going on and on. We're having a hearing. You know, they withdrew their first charge, put in a different charge. All of this is kind of going on with no real clarity of why they care about him so much, why he needs to be detained. The record, when we got into federal court, showed increasingly clear evidence that the only justification or motivation here was chilling speech. That this was an attempt to take somebody's constitutionally protected speech. And this kid had posted Free Palestine on his website or on his Facebook page. He was not, he had hashtag Free Palestine. He was not out leading protests. That was the only thing that the federal court could find as any justification. We asserted that this was really a targeted attack on free speech and on people's ability to, engage in constitutionally protected activity. The judge, Judge Blackwell, ordered Mr. Hawk released after 40 days in jail. And I'll just read some of his remarks. As to the second Martin factor, I'm sure you're all excited about that. The circumstances surrounding petitioner's detention are exceptional and warrant special treatment in the interest of justice. He's now been in custody for over a month. The factual record is substantial and unrefuted. There's an unrefuted IJ finding that he posed no danger, credible allegations of retaliatory motive by the government following protected speech, and shifting post hoc explanations to justify his arrest, unsupported by any contemporaneous explanation demonstrating the reason for it. Now, we are really, really happy that he's released. But he still faces removal proceedings, right? And we can't get back the 40 days he spent in jail. That's finals time. So he paid tuition to Mankato, to us, and he's not, I don't think he's going to do well on his exams if he even was able to sit them. His family really suffered. They are terrified. One of the reasons you haven't heard about this case in the news is because he has all this family here, and he was deeply worried that they would be arrested too. The campus community felt that chill. And really tragically, he had some serious health conditions. So he has a bad hernia from an accident, and he missed his surgical appointment at Mayo while he was in detention, and the hernia was sort of pushing through on every breath that he was taking. We hope that he'll be able to have that repaired now that he's out. But there was real harm that was done. And the real truth here is that he's not an outlier. This is a bellwether, right? That anybody could be picked up for anything, and that makes us afraid, right? And that is the point. That's similar to the deportations to El Salvador, right? Where, a mistake might have been made, but boy, everybody is justified in getting people out and to El Salvador using this summary 1878 act that allows for the expulsion with no hearing of enemy aliens. The problem with that is in 1798, we didn't have any immigration laws at all. There weren't actually any ways to deport people. That was the only thing we had. And in the meantime, we built a whole structure of process. So we could actually find out if somebody was in threat and hold them accountable and expel them. We also have international treaties that have come along through recognition of the deep horrors of atrocities of the Second World War. We have a convention that protects people from summary deportation if they fear persecution or torture. And that is also the law of the land. It's not just that old act in a vacuum. It's that combined with these other inviolable obligations that we have. And the most high-profile person who's been deported to El Salvador or sent to El Salvador actually had gone through a deportation hearing in front of an immigration judge and been ordered not to be deported to El Salvador. He could be deported anywhere else in the world, but not to El Salvador because of fear of torture, which is what happened when we sent him to El Salvador. Now, we could have expelled him to any place else, but we just didn't bother to look at the paperwork. That's appalling. It's appalling. Or as my former boss would say, that's outrageous. Civil society depends on trust, and the policies that are not just targeting individuals, they're really targeting the trust we have in our institutions. The Safe Spaces memo that was in place that discouraged ICE from coming into churches or schools to make arrests has been rescinded. They were never prevented from doing that. They just had to have a good operational reason and supervisor sign off to do that. But our volunteers at Immigration Court have seen a number of people who were picked up when dropping their kids off from school or off to school. I think one that really threw my project coordinator into a tailspin emotionally was this guy who was bringing his disabled kid to school, and ICE was looking for somebody, they said. They asked him about his status, took him into custody, and he's been deported. This is not good, right? Because we want people to take their kids to school. They have a constitutional right to go to school. We have an obligation as society to make sure we have an educated populace, and we've got frightened parents who may not feel safe dropping their kids off. Much of the work that we've been doing in the last few months has been not just legal defense work or filing applications or any of that, but it's been safety planning with our clients. It's been presentations in rooms like this saying, how do you put together basically an estate plan? How do you make sure you've got a delegation of parental authority for your kids so that if you can't come home, there's a plan? How do you make sure that your pension that you've earned working here is able to be accessed if you're deported? How do you control what you can control? And indeed, that's what we're doing as an organization, as it's increasingly clear that organizations who do this work will be in the crosshairs. We've had funding cut and then restored and then cut and restored through court litigation for our work representing unaccompanied children. Well, we can weather that here at the Advocates. Some of our colleagues, working in detention centers in rural parts of the country, had to let their whole teams go because if there was no money, they did not have any other way to do that work. This all undermines our public institutions and trust. So, there's no doubt that this is an attack and that this is destabilizing, but something else is also true. Since the start of the year, I think we've had about 150 individuals sign up to be immigration court volunteers. That's amazing. I don't know that we can have enough hearings to get them all in places. So this is really powerful. Communities showing up. People are bearing witness. People are demanding transparency. People are documenting the truth. There is a spirit of resistance, but there is real power in community. And your mission, the building solidarity together, walking alongside all God's people, striving for a more just world, acting courageously to transform social systems and relationships could not be more appropriate and powerful and needed in this moment. So thank you so much. We have some time for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michele, for your insights. Now is the time for questions. Anybody online or in the room, I'll roam around with a microphone so the people on the live stream can hear as well.
And do you have the live stream questions? Excellent, okay. And so nothing there?
Or you have a microphone? Okay.
Great. Any questions or thoughts, reflections? I think one of the things that people have asked a lot is, how can I help? What can I do? This is actually doing something. Being here and bearing witness and thinking about this and keeping this at the forefront. But we do, I mentioned the volunteer court observers. We have at least one in the room here with Karen. Others of you may have been out at immigration court, but taking part in that is so powerful. We need volunteers at our reception desk. If you have a law license, we'll just set up a checkpoint before you leave to get your information and assign you a case. We need help. We need help. So it'll be fine. We'll provide support for that. Truly, if there are people who are interested in representing clients, we need that. And we need financial support always. So one of the things that I'm so grateful for with Westminster is the community partnerships that provide financial support from this congregation.
I think we have a question from the online
And
Yes.
then one up here.
group.
Well, for
Green is go.
is it audible?
Yes.
Morning, everybody.
Good
I am
morning.
also a Presbyterian, so that's the reason I ended up in this church and living across the road for this week. My question is, the more I listened to you, the more I thought of the medical elements. And really, particularly in focus for me is women and children. What is it like? What's the mental health anguish they're going through? What are the basic needs, food and the shelter? And then for the women and children, violations, because I know that's the unspoken, yet it is happening. Pregnant women not even being able to access care. I don't know how we can possibly partner, because this is where I come in with a global voice and see whether we can actually help with really increasing the amplification of voice and agency. That this is what's happening in silence.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here and being part of our community, even fleetingly. But the toll is real. What Mr. Hawk went through in detention is happening to people avoiding care. Minnesota Care Access is on the chopping block at the legislature, and this is what always happens in times of actual or perceived scarcity. We cut programs for undocumented people or for immigrants. That is always first to go. This is real, and the trauma effects will be felt, not for a few years, but for a few generations. I still work with kids who got DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, whose family narrative included expulsions of their grandparents in the Dust Bowl years back to Mexico. This doesn't just end in one spot. So this is something our community will have to endure and help with, not just now, but we're sowing seeds for long-term needs. I think just telling the truth, bringing this into international dialogue, being aware as you're negotiating things, there might be barriers here to overcome. All of that's that's real and important part of the landscape.
Thank you for your work. Yes, it is essential and urgent right now. With the Doge firings and the tariffs that are coming down and all of the reverberations from that, I'm wondering, does your organization get federal dollars or state dollars, and how are you affected today by these?
That's a great question. We are fortunate to have a really balanced portfolio. I think our board's worked really hard to make sure that happens. So over a third of our operating support comes from individuals, which is very stable and really helps us weather these storms. But we do receive state funding. We've had state legal aid, legal services funding for many years. And several years ago, the state invested in immigration-specific legal services. And that has helped us with our legal aid partners to launch a hub of sort of a new way of doing things for all of our legal services organizations with a more community accessibility focused approach. But that's, those monies are only available if the federal government is doing its part. And then we did have we don't have a lot of federal funding for reasons like this. It's very volatile and easily coerces you into not doing your job as advocates for human rights. But we did have a contract through another large partnership for legal services for kids facing deportation alone. That was cut unilaterally, and then there was a lawsuit, and they came back, and it'll limp forward for a few more months. We'll see what happens with that. It's a huge loss for us. It's manageable. I think we will be stable with it without it, but there were 26,000 children being represented at the time the contract was cut nationwide through a network of about 100 providers. So, this is absurd. Now, children, and we still see, even with that funding, many, many children showing up to court on their own, with maybe a parent, a guardian, somebody, a neighbor, but they speak for themselves. And when you're in court, you do a tiny bit of the work that's needed to secure a kid's immigration status. The judge is kind of doing status check-ins as the child is responsible for getting a state court order for protection and guardianship, then taking that and filing that as the basis for getting immigration status, and they have to file their asylum application with another government agency. And if they've been exploited through their labor or they're working, child labor or any of that, and they file a trafficking case, that goes to law enforcement and then another agency. Most children just are awful at paperwork. And so it's set up to fail, right? It's designed to fail. And we have relief available for kids. We have ways to protect them, but it's an absurd situation, right? So taking that funding away was really devastating to making sure kids would have a modicum of due process protections as they join their families or communities here. We've had about 5,000 kids arrive in Minnesota via the Office of Refugee Resettlement's detention centers in the last 5 years. And, it's really devastating to see them left behind. And taking this tool away was really, really bad. We did have one other loss of funding, and that was one that would surprise no one. We were going to start working on gender-based violence prevention in Morocco with LGBTIQ plus women. That was not in the administration's priorities at all, and that was cut as well. But that was just underway. We've got one in the back.
With the revoking of student visas, is each college or university addressing that individually, or are they looking to collectively try to address this? And I ask that question because of the pressure that's being put on from the current administration around free speech on campus and withholding dollars in order to try to extort that kind of behavior.
Right. I think that's a really astute observation. There is some coordinated effort, but the challenges to these cases are happening on the case, the visa holder, him or herself. And so we've seen really good success in federal courts. I think a Metro State case, they just reached agreement and dismissed the removal charges yesterday. Or probably, yeah, yesterday, I think that was announced. So it's both and, because from the like solidarity perspective, I think universities have decided to come together a lot more as Harvard took the lead on that. You saw more courage from other institutions. I think we've got some really good people here in Minnesota leading that as well. But then the legal cases are happening on the individual level, and those are succeeding. So that's been frustrating. So, we will see a different thing start spinning out. And to be truthful, they don't need to do things across the board. You need a few shock and awe moments, right? So the two of the student activists were actually green card holders who were going, one was going to his naturalization interview. So it's like, okay, now around our office, we've got some green card holders on staff. Like, am I going to lose my green card because I work at the Advocates for Human Rights? I don't know, right? I can't, so that distracts, not just, like for the people who are actually impacted, it distracts energy and resilience from everybody in that, from us who are worried about our colleagues, from the colleagues themselves. Our denaturalization statutes are very broad. They really were written to address Cold War politics and the Red Scare. And so they have a lot of power to take away naturalization for people. All of this is out there. But I think, again, the end game isn't just the students or the green card holders. It's all of us. What do you want to say? What do you think you're safe saying? Because if we can accidentally deport a few U.S. citizen kids, or, then it really changes the ballgame on where people can be taken and sent and what will happen to us and those legal protections that we've relied on to keep dissent legal in the United States. It's perilous.
Michele, in the last few minutes that we have, could you speak to what Macalester College has started doing in response to all of this?
I have not seen what they're doing. So tell me more, because I've just missed this one. I've seen some stuff from Suzanne, but yeah, Kay,
What they're doing is allowing students to stay for people
for the summer, so they don't have to travel.
They're providing housing, and they're also soliciting from the alumni.
Right.
Help.
They have not found me.
They haven't found it.
Yes. I will watch out, and I am not going to pick up the phone. But no, this is really important. And I think we worked with Mac early on in the semester around safe campus community policies, and, they were saying, what should we do? Like, put a legal defense fund together, because your students might need help hiring a lawyer, do these things. And after the Tufts abduction, they came up with some really strong creative policies. And I think that kind of thing, the reason that's so important is that if you leave, any alien coming back into the United States is re-inspected and can be readmitted or not at the will of the border agent. And it's a hugely vulnerable time when there's much more attention on you, the traveler. So that's fantastic. Thank you for, I will try to be better about reading my alum emails. So this is the fundraising curse, right? So thanks. That's
I
really
just
proud
wanted to
Presbyterian tradition.
say that having worked my whole career as someone that worked with international students at a University of Minnesota, this is just a traumatic time for the advisors for just that reason. How do you advise somebody that normally would go home in the summer or wants to go home for a job interview because they eventually want to work in their home country, or there's a death in the family? It's things like that that are just
and it's the cost we
such a
won't
toll
ever
on
see,
advisors too.
because people won't come in. You know, and so there will be this residual loss. If I were the parent of an incoming college student from another country, I don't know that I would be looking at the U.S. I'd be looking at Canada. Like I have a choice with my dollars and my precious child, and that's a loss to us. So,
But our national association is very active lobbying. NAFSA, the Association of International Educators, and I, even though I've been retired for some time, I'm writing letters and calling on these issues because I think that's one thing that we can do.
that's right.
And we've gotten very positive responses from our legislators.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you. Thank you. Michele, we really appreciate your being here and taking the time and for sharing your insights and your wisdom. And let's just keep being active, all of us. This is the last Social Justice Forum for the year. We look forward to welcoming you again September 7th, Coming Together Sunday. But in the meantime, we invite you to attend the Faith Nixon Symposium, which is Sunday, June 1st at 9 a.m. And at that, we'll welcome Elder Suzanne Kelly, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Minnesota Council of Churches. And you can register on the church's website. So once again, thank you so much for being with us, Michele.
Thank you.